I think you need to surround yourself with people who have a very strong work ethic, who are not interested in doing mediocre work. The more excellence-oriented that you surround yourself with, it's going to rub off on you.
Donald Miller, the story guy, what he shares with you and me about marketing and how to own a problem. And he gives us great case studies of Domino's, what Ryan Reynolds is doing. Great stories, but amazing lessons.
It's one of the reasons that you want to talk 75% about the problem, 25% about the solution, because the problem is the trigger that makes people want to buy the solution. There's good in the world and there's bad in the world. And I just want to wake up and say, let me put a little something on the good.
Donald Miller, let's go. So, Donald Miller, your version of success. How does success happen?
How does it happen? You make good decisions over and over and over and over again. And then you look back and pretend that you intended to do it.
So is there a formula for success that you've worked out after all these years?
I think that there are formulas that are very, very helpful.
Right.
But the definition of success changes. I mean, it changes. For me, when I was a kid, it was, to get on some sports team or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, now it's being a dad. My definition of success has changed over the years. I think when I was young, it was sort of to prove myself.
Yeah.
And now that I'm older, it's to help other people.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I could have had that early because, you got to figure out, and then when you go, you're like, and then
we all wanted the car or the watch or that when you're young.
Yes.
And then you get it and you go,
that's not as fulfilling as I thought it was.
Yeah.
But you know what? Pete Carroll, I interviewed Pete Carroll when he was coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And he said, Don, I had the luxury of succeeding early, which taught me success doesn't matter as much, that there's a diminishing return on me winning. It becomes less and less valuable. He said, but when I started helping other people win, there was no diminishing return. It just got better and better and better. And so I've borrowed his definition of success was just to help other people win.
So if you go back, somewhere in life you chose success as your performance standard.
Yeah.
Do you remember when that was or how that happened?
Well, I don't know if you're an Enneagram fan. Have you ever gotten into an Enneagram? It's like personality types.
Yeah. There's
9 of them according to this particular theory. I'm a 3 of the 9, and the 3 is all about success. The 2 will define themselves by quality relationships. 3 is by winning.
Right.
And so for me, it was embedded in me that if you win, if you are successful, you matter. I don't believe that's true. I think there's a bunch of different ways to matter. But for me, it was important to get out there and compete and try to win. I didn't do that in sports because God did not give me the sort of body that would do that. But when I discovered writing books, it was important for me to write a really good book. And then it was important for me for that book to be a bestseller.
What's the formula for writing a great book then?
Is that one? Yes, I can give you, talent. I don't have talent. So let's go with a different formula. Every chapter should solve a problem. And every chapter should come together to solve a much bigger problem.
Yeah.
But I think if you're sitting down to write a book, you say, what problem do I want to solve? Or help somebody else solve, you're probably going to end up with a pretty good book.
Yeah. So if you look at success, people say you got to surround yourself with successful people, that sort of stuff. What's your theory on that?
Well, I think you need to surround yourself with people who have a very strong work ethic, who are not interested in doing mediocre work, who will, put forth the effort to accomplish great things. People who are intelligent. I 100% believe that the more excellence oriented that you surround yourself with, those people who you surround yourself with, it's going to rub off on you. So I think there's no question that that's true.
People often refer to success and failure. How do you view the relationship between success and failure?
Well, they're called stakes. Stakes in a story are very important. And if there are no stakes in the story, there's no story. So to always have in your mind, hey, if you don't get up out of bed and, for me, get in the cold plunge, get in the gym, failure's waiting for you.
Yeah.
And it's chasing you. And it wants you. It wants to destroy you. To me, I see it as a game. I'm not talking about I don't think if I go to heaven and God says, you didn't make enough money, I don't think that's ever gonna, I don't think that's ever going to happen. So I mean this in a playful sense. You know, if you don't get up and put some work into that book, somebody's going to write on Amazon that it's a terrible book.
Yeah.
So let's get up and do the work.
Doing the work is one part of success. What else is there that someone has to have in order to make success a part of their life?
Routine. So, you know, I don't know that we need to think very much about the end result.
Right.
I don't know that that's very helpful. But, you know, you'll love this, Brad. I used to weigh 200 more pounds than I weigh now. And I'm within 5.
I have noticed that, yes.
I'm within 5 to 10 pounds of wrapping it up. I can still grab my failure. That caught me. You know, pay for that for a long time. But what I found was that if I think about, you know, being in good shape or something like that, it's not very helpful. But if I just think about waking up and getting down into the garage and doing my ridiculous excuse for a workout, but I do it, you know, if I obsess about the process and not about the result, things happen. So we all understand fitness and things like that. The same is true with writing a book. You know, I go to a coffee shop in Nashville, Tennessee called Stay Golden. They put me at table 74 and I order the exact same meal. In fact, if I walk in that door, the chef sees me and he starts cooking my food. Done it for years. For me, I just need to sit down in that seat and stay there for 2.5 hours. If I do that, I will write a book, a best-selling book, every 18 months. And, you know, I've been doing that for a lot of years. And so for me, it's really not about writing the book or the best-selling book, although that's the end result. It's about, did you show up at Stay Golden? Did you sit down in that seat? And did you do something that day? Sometimes it's no words, you know, sometimes it's 2,000 words. But if I go through the routine produces results.
Yeah. So that goes back to the theory of you don't rise to your goals, you fall to your systems, or you call it routines type thing.
What you want to do is you want to get yourself, you want to, you know, to use James Clear's ideas, you know, you want to create the habits that produce results without really thinking about the results.
Yeah.
You know, if I get out of bed, you know, the other thing is habits, you know, / you know, addictions, right? What are some happy, positive, good, healthy addictions that you can have? You know, I wake up every morning. I do not feel like working out. I don't feel like doing anything. But I know that if all I have to do is walk downstairs, get into my cold plunge, and when I get in my cold plunge, it's going to make me want to get on the exercise bike. When I get on the exercise bike, it's going to make me want to get on the rower. When I get on the rower, it's going to make me want to hit the heavy bag. So I got to control one thing. Walking downstairs and getting into freezing water. If I can do that, but I don't wake up and go, I want to be excellent. Look, I don't do that. I wake up going, you just got to do one thing, Miller. Just put the first foot out.
You know, I remember as a young man getting that whole theory of I got to wake up and look in the mirror and do my
it's never worked for me.
And do all that stuff. And you know, it was about, I got to fake it in my own head till I make it. I got to bring my own belief. Where does that belief come from for you? How does that happen for you?
Well, you know, my faith is not very complicated. I believe that God loves people, and I believe, true or not, I don't know, way out of my pay grade. I believe that the devil hates people, and I want to play on the right team. And so for me, it's like, hey, Don, if you're willing to wake up every morning and help somebody, God's with you.
Got it.
And that for thee, that's it. It's just that simple. I realize that's not true in the sense that it's much more complicated than that. And I don't want to get into astrophysics.
Greater philosophers than you and I have made this for a lot longer than we've been alive.
Exactly, and way smarter. But, you know, there's good in the world and there's bad in the world. And I just want to wake up and say, let me put a little something on the good.
Yeah.
And if I can do that, I think I'm going to be okay.
Donald Miller. Marketing, massive term today. How do you define it?
Well, I define marketing as telling people about what you're doing. You know, that's really it. And now some people tell people about what they're doing, and it's a massive failure. And they spend millions of dollars telling people about what they're doing, and nobody pays attention. So I call that bad marketing.
No one called. It's not a good ad.
No. I mean, we have to say that, right? And marketing is one of the few businesses where you can pay somebody a lot of money and they can give you nothing in return, and they keep the money. So that's called a ripoff. You got conned.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think there's a lot of bad marketing people out there. I think, they try something and it doesn't work and they charge you anyway.
Yeah.
If I go in and do a strategy session for somebody, I offer a 10x return on the investment. So if you pay me, you have to make 10 times the money that you paid me, or else I give you your money back.
Yeah.
And I've never failed.
Well, I'm a big Domino believer. SB7 framework for all of the new websites, all the
Good.
stuff.
Couldn't help a better guy.
But when you look at success in marketing today, what is it that makes marketing work now?
Yeah. Whenever I go in with a client, the number one thing I want that client to do is own a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is I want to know first of all, I want them to know, because they often don't.
Yeah.
What is the number one problem that your product solves? And by number one, I mean the one that resonates the strongest with the customer. And then if we are able to define that, sometimes we A/B test it, sometimes we survey it, but what are they responding to? If we can own that problem, we can take the market. And so whenever somebody thinks of that problem, they need to think of your product. So what that normally means is we're going to talk 75% of the time about the customer's problem and only 25% about your product. Because what we're going to do is we're going to associate that problem with your thing. And it needs to be a problem that people feel. And when they feel it, they go, oh, call X. So what that means is the marketing is, if you ever feel this, call us. And then what you do is when you get that sentence, which is the hardest part, if you ever feel this problem, call us. And then you repeat it 750 million times.
Only 750? Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll call and say, well, it's still going great. I said, but you've only repeated it 300 million times. You have a lot more to go. You got to keep doing it. And that's when I say own a problem, the goal of a marketing plan or a campaign is to own a problem. And you got to buy that mental real estate with repetition.
Yeah. Where did you fall in love with marketing? How did that become your passion?
I didn't realize it, but for 10, 15 years, I wrote memoirs.
Yeah.
I had no interest in business, really. I accidentally stumbled into business. But I wrote 7 or 8 memoirs. They ended up on the New York Times Bestsellers list for over a year, did very, very well. And in order to write those books and keep people reading those books, I had to figure out how to get the reader to turn the page.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to write something that makes you want to turn the page. And so unknowingly, I got really good at figuring out how to open what's called story loops.
Yeah.
You open a story loop. My cousin and I just tried to jump across the Grand Canyon on our motorbikes. Opened a story loop. How'd it go? Actually terrible. That's not a true story. But you open and close these story loops. And so I realized when I'd written my 7th or 8th memoir, nothing else had happened. I didn't want to write another memoir.
Yeah.
I didn't need the money. And somebody came to me just accidentally with some marketing questions. And I realized, this is the same skill set. This company needs to open a story loop that the customer needs to buy their product to close it, right? Domino's Pizza was going bankrupt. And the new CEO of Domino Pizza came in to save the company. And he paid millions of dollars, probably their last bit of change. And he went on national television and he said, I'm the CEO of Domino's Pizza, and our pizza for a decade has tasted horrible. He said, you've probably spent money in order to Domino's Pizza and been so disappointed by how this thing tasted. I want you to know I fixed it, and it tastes amazing. Well, everybody out there is going, I'm going to go ahead and spend $10 and see if this guy's right. And you know what? One of the fastest growing chains in America. Everybody goes,
I thought that was one of the bravest marketing moves ever.
Well, also never do it unless you're going bankrupt.
Yeah.
Right. Terrible move if your company's doing well. But what the great move was, he opened a story loop.
Yeah.
It made people so intensely curious to find out if it's true. And they spent the money. And by the way, I ordered a lot of Domino's Pizza that year, and it was true. It tasted pretty good.
I am still a Domino's customer because of that campaign.
Isn't that amazing?
It got me brilliantly. I remember as a kid reading John Capel's tested advertising methods, and he would start headlines with "Here's how" and "Here's why" and 7 reasons this, and it was like that's all he did. He opened a loop.
Open story loops.
Yeah. So when we look at marketing today, owning the brand, that sort of thing, people come to their business and they look at, well, how do I do that? So how does a normal business owner thinking about their business go, how do I start a story loop?
Well, going back to the beginning, the way to start a story loop is to open with the problem. Mm-hmm. For example, let's say you and I are at a cocktail party, walking around talking to people. You talk to one person, you say, what do you do? And they say, I'm an at-home chef. Mm-hmm. I come to your house and cook. You're probably going to say, yeah, it's interesting. My wife and I actually occasionally need a chef. You try to remember. Chances are you're never going to give that person $1.
Yeah.
You'll have conversations about their favorite restaurants. You go to another person an hour later, same product, same quality, same price. You say, what do you do? They say, well, you know how most families don't eat together anymore? And when they do, they don't eat healthy? I'm an at-home chef. Now, what did chef number 2 do? They opened a story loop by agitating in you a problem that they feel. And whenever they felt that, all of a sudden they feel that and they want a solution now. And then you say, here's the solution.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of saying, here's the problem that you solve, opens the story loop, and here's the solution. Now, there's some mistakes that people make. The first is they're too vague. So if I say something like, you know how a lot of people don't have fulfillment in their life? It doesn't open a story. But if I say to you, you know, a lot of people have a dog, and when somebody knocks at the door, the dog barks and barks at the door, and it drives everybody crazy. Yes, by the way, I do have that dog.
Yes.
And I've not found anybody who could solve that problem. I'm a dog trainer. You're going to do so much more business, and it's one of the reasons that you want to talk 75% about the problem, 25% about the solution, because the problem is the trigger that makes people want to buy the solution.
Got it. Last year when you were on stage for us in Vegas, you tell the story about people want to get married on the first date. Can you please explain that? First of all, tell everyone the story, because I love the way you position marketing from that.
Yeah. If you meet somebody, or if you go to, they go to your website or whatever, and you immediately sell your product, which, by the way, I do want you to sell your product on your website, so don't get me wrong. What you're doing is you're asking for a commitment before you've actually built the relationship. Mm-hmm. So you do want to ask for that commitment on your website, because it might be the 5th or 6th time somebody comes to you. But if it's the first time, you actually want to take them on a first date, a second date, a third date, and a fourth date. Relationships move through 3 phases: curiosity, enlightenment, and commitment. Mm-hmm. Curiosity happens when somebody realizes there's something about this person, this brand, this leader, this product that might help me improve my life, might help me survive, might help me thrive.
Hey, I'm interested.
That's exactly it. When you trigger that response, they actually automatically move to the second phase of a relationship, which is enlightenment. Mm-hmm. And enlightenment is when we're discovering due diligence. We're saying, hey, how much is this going to cost? Will it actually work for me? What happens if it doesn't work? And then if I can answer those questions well, I move to the third phase, which is commitment.
Yep.
And commitment is where I'm willing to exchange some money for the product.
Yeah.
In relationships, it's, wow, she looks pretty good, and wow, she's actually not crazy, and I love spending time with her, and she's really a wonderful person. Will you marry me?
Yeah.
Curiosity, enlightenment, commitment. So the brands are the same way. The problem that most brands have is they never pique curiosity. They go right into enlightenment and ask for commitment, or worse, they just ask for the commitment. But you never actually piqued my curiosity. And the way you pique curiosity is you open a story loop that somehow makes me feel like this brand could help me survive and thrive. And let me find out how and whether or not it's true.
Yeah, I try and help people understand that you got to get them to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm interested. And then you got to nurture them enough to say, hey, I'm ready.
Yes.
And get those 2 actions out of people. When you think a brand today, like, you mentioned Domino's, that sort of thing, what's a brand that's doing it well, and what's a brand that's not doing it well?
Well, it's harder to name the brands that aren't doing it well, because while there are millions of them, nobody has ever heard of them, right?
Yeah.
They don't live very long. Because if you're not piquing people's curiosity, you're forgotten. You're just forgotten. Let's take the case of Ryan Reynolds, who owns Mint Mobile. He owns Wrexham. He owns Aviation Gen. Mm-hmm. You might say that that Ryan's formula is to take something and then bring the celebrity spotlight to it. I think that's part of it. But I think let's take Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile, he buys this little mobile phone company, and then, of course, he brings his attention to it. But he actually runs advertising that's very, very bad advertising. He says, the reason that we're running such cheap advertising is we just want to pass the money on to you.
Yeah.
So he chose, the problem is cell phone coverage is actually expensive, and I'm going to do away with all that and give you a really great price on this. And that's what brings attention to the brand.
Yeah.
And so I think you want to identify what problem are we going to solve. Mint Mobile probably could have solved 50 problems. He chose one.
Yeah.
Here's a great example. Aura rings. This is not an Aura ring. This is just a wedding ring.
This is an Aura ring.
But I did wear one. I wore one for a long time. And it does a lot. It measures your heartbeat and all that kind of stuff, measures the steps that you do in a day, tells you whether or not you had a good night's sleep. The sleep part always confused me because I know if I got a good night's sleep, right? But one of the things that brand did was they did some studies on what's the number one problem that people are loving that we solve. They discovered it wasn't step count, heart rate, or any of that. It was sleep. And so what happens is after years of advertising the Oura Ring, they stopped advertising all of the benefits and only advertised one, sleep. Now think about that. They took all these wonderful things that this product does and said, let's not talk about it. Let's only talk about one of the problems that it solves. And we're going to own that problem because you can't own 30 problems. You can only own one. So they spent millions of dollars calling it a sleep lab on your finger, and sales went up. Let me be really clear. They reduced the number of problems that this thing solved, at least in the mind of the public, because it actually solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
They reduced, and sales went up. And what that says to us is you can't own 30 problems. You can only own one. And so they picked the problem, and sales go up.
Well, hey there, and thanks for listening. I've noticed that 78% of you are brand new, which means you haven't hit the subscribe button yet. By subscribing, you help us bring on even better guests, better quality content, and serve you better with even more podcasts. So please hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. It makes a huge difference. If you support us, we're going to support your success and help you achieve big success together.
So a business that goes from small to mid-size to large, what's the difference between a business that goes from good to great, that scales, specifically with the marketing side of it? Because a lot of them struggle with scaling from marketing.
Yeah. Well, you've got to get, this, you've got to get your processes down. So when a business first starts, you're it's called an owner hustle.
Yeah.
And you're just out there trying to dot every I, cross every T. And then you start bringing people on board. And when people come on board, you realize you've got to have processes. And so you create those processes. I think scaling is really about turning things into repeatable processes. That's the first challenge. We need to figure out what's our marketing process, what's our sales process, what's our product optimization process, what's our inventory process, all those sorts of things. When you start putting these things into books, metaphorical books, then people can come and go, but your processes are there. I think processes is probably the hardest part. And then you start realizing that we've got to start replacing people.
Yeah.
That the people just have to be hired. I think business owners think that the right employee is going to solve their problem. It's the right employee running the right processes that's going to solve your problem. If you bring in the right employee and there's no processes, that employee is irreplaceable. And if they go, the business goes.
Yeah.
And we've all experienced that. So, I think you get your processes right, and then you just bring in excellent people.
Scaling the marketing, taking that marketing process and building it big. How do we do that? Where do we start?
Well, for most people watching, if you don't have a sales funnel, you want to create a sales funnel. And so what I mean by a sales funnel is, I sell books for a living. So let me just use myself for an example. A book is $25 on Amazon. A lot of people will just buy the book. But what if we create a free PDF that is downloadable, cheaper than a book, and then write them 52 emails, one every week, that talk about the book? Now we can get them to write the book. So we've just done that. Now, once that works, we want to actually create a different PDF that creates 52 more emails that sells the book. When we have 20 PDFs that are putting people on emails, we're going to sell a lot more books, which we do. We sell a ton of books.
Yeah.
And that's why you do it. So I think you create one thing that works. Most people will stop there, and you don't want to stop. You want to keep creating more and more and more.
And when you do the more, do you do a slightly different target audience?
100%.
Right. So tell me more about that process.
Well, you want to figure out the demographics of people who would be interested in your book. I wrote a book called Building a Story Brand. It's the reason that we're talking. Helps you clarify your marketing message.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm going to put a lead generator on for the 5 mistakes dentists make.
Got it.
Right. And then I'm going to do the 3 mistakes pet stores make. And then I'm going to do the 10 things every lawyer needs to do to run an effective marketing. And now it's a hub and spoke, right? So here's my Building a Story Brand. I've got to outreach to lawyers and outreach to dentists and outreach to this. And you want to find those demographics. Often the smaller that demographic is, the more books they will buy because you're the only one talking to them.
Got it. So keep building on it. How much testing and measuring do you guys do with that then? How much science is there behind it?
For us, almost none.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, for us, almost none. We do some of it, to be honest. But I know if I create a lead generator, I know how many people downloaded it. I know if it worked or it didn't work. And if it works, we're going to change it a little bit and create another one for dentists and another one for lawyers and another one for whatever. There's a lot of money that gets spent on testing and marketing that I just think is a waste. Now, if you're going to launch a $50 million ad campaign, you can't miss.
Yeah.
But if you're but for me, Brad, I don't know about you, but just getting those reps, right? Over and over and over, as many as I can, as fast as I can. What I can't stand that happens sometimes in our small businesses is we'll create something and 6 or 8 weeks later realize it's not working, but the team has moved on. So we created a landing page recently for my company. Every single week we meet to improve something on that landing page. And we're going to keep doing it until results are amazing. And when they're amazing, we're going to say, how can we make them even more amazing? But I don't think we want to ship something and just leave it. So for me, rather than testing something, why not put something out there, find out what's working, what's not working, and then change it in real time?
Yeah, real-time change today. I mean,
you could do it so fast.
Well, AI has totally changed that whole game. Do you see it getting into marketing real fast, or is it going to take a lot longer than most people think?
No, I think it's already there.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's only going to improve more and more, especially on messaging. I'll use ChatGPT as a sort of a feedback coach.
Yeah.
I'll go to it and say, hey, I'm thinking about running a marketing campaign where I'm going to say this. Will you give me 10 different ways to say that, or a way that it might be better? And it'll give me, it's not as good yet as a really creative human being, but what it's really good at is getting the creativity out of the human being.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful conversationalist to get to better and better the marketing message.
So let's talk about winning the marketing. You win your book, StoryBrand, you win that market. Right?
Yes.
And you then go on and create another book and another book. Do you try and win the same target audience? You try and win the next target audience? How do you build on you? I mean, you're building the Donald Miller brand to keep winning different targets. How does that happen?
Well, I think you actually it's kind of like a cordless screwdriver. I can use a cordless screwdriver to screw in a screw, or I can change it out, put a drill bit in, and drill a drill. So, for me, the thing that I accidentally got known for was story and storytelling, and clarify your message to tell a better story. I wrote a book about that. That book sold a lot of copies. Then I wrote a book about how to clarify your life story. That book sold a lot of copies, right? I will write a book someday called A New Story for America on what we need to do as a country. So I'm literally just taking the cordless screwdriver, changing the bit, and doing anything I want with it.
Build the screwdriver, change the bits.
Yeah.
Love it. So
but the key, though, was to be known for something in the first place. So if they say Don Miller is the story guy or the messaging guy, you want to actually pay a lot of attention to the way people are talking to you, about you. If you go out on the trail and you speak, how are they introducing you? Because they'll tell you what the public, and as soon as they say, Don Miller is the king of story or something like that, I remember somebody introducing me. Don Miller is one of the greatest storytellers in the world. I've never told a story.
Yeah.
I just talk about story and story structure and how to invite customers into a story. Somehow I got known as the story guy. So what should my next book be called? How to Live a Better Story, right? I mean, I should run with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Run with what they've given you. So, final two questions, big question, then a little question. Big question. What is your purpose in all of this education, all of the stuff you're doing? How does it, because you are and you're still more passionate today than I've ever seen you before.
Yeah. I want to hold a microphone up to the right people and get their story out there. That's really it. When you look around and you say, what's wrong with the world? I'll tell you what's wrong with the world. The wrong people have the microphone. That's really it. Because there's beauty out there. There's faith out there. There's hope out there. They just don't have a microphone.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is just say, and I meet with people all the time. Just met with some very influential people on national security and China policy. I want to sit down and say, hey, this is really important. How do we clarify this so that everybody understands exactly what this problem is and what we need to do about it? And for me, that was a day where you're handing the microphone to a very important group of people who have a very important cause. So I think if I spend the rest of my life saying, not getting my story out there, but saying, there's a cure for cancer right there.
How do we get that story?
And you're talking about it in such a way, nobody understands what you're saying. I mean that metaphorically. I hope there is a cure for cancer, and I hope to help them someday. So if I can do that for the rest of my life, I'm very happy.
Final question's always the same for me. Best advice you ever got or the best quote you ever heard on the subject of success?
Before I ever wrote a book, I had a friend who'd written a book. The book didn't do well, but I had a friend who'd written a book. And he said, Don, if you ever write a book, be your own editor. And what he meant by that was, he said, nobody's going to care as much about that book as you will. And I applied that to all the books I've ever written, but I also applied it to my life. Nobody's going to rescue you. You've got to do the work. Nobody's going to care about the excellence of what you're doing more than you will. You can't hand it off to somebody and let them do it. Now, I delegate a lot. But on the stuff that's really, really important, I take ownership of the excellence.
Big Success Podcast, Donald Miller. Follow, read, study, do all the things. We'll be back next week with more of your success.
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.